Policy Bootcamp online edition. So MPPC, or the Malaysian Public Policy Competition 2025, is co-organized by Sunway Center for Planetary Health, Sunway University. I would like to give you a quick overview before we begin our panel session on what MPPC is all about. So the Malaysian Public Policy Competition is an annual case-based competition open to Malaysian students from all backgrounds. It aims to empower youth to engage in real-world public policy making, and it showcases student-crafted solutions to pressing national issues. So participants in the MPPC competition underwent a selection process earlier in this year, and the bootcamp kickstarts the competition period with a semifinals and finals happening in August. So today's session is day one of our two-day policy bootcamp. So today is the 21st of June, which features an online panel session. And our in-person policy bootcamp will be next week on Saturday, 28th of June at the Sunway International School. Today, we hope to offer valuable insights and inspiring perspectives, and we have no doubts that that would be achieved today with our esteemed panelists. And this is your first step as participants towards an exciting journey in policymaking. So let's get started. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator of the day, Tasha Pan, the Project Executive Director of MPPC 2025. Tasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hannes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the MPPC Policy Bootcamp online panel session titled Value Chain Architects, Strategies for Ascending the Value Chain. We are thrilled to have you for this exciting session. Today's discussion will explore key strategies for businesses and organizations to move up the value chain and to explore how they can leverage digital innovation and sustainability to create a lasting impact. We are honored to be joined by three distinguished panelists. First up, we have Mr. Nicholas Kaur, who is the Head Research and Co-Head Private Markets at Khazanah Nasional. Mr. Nicholas holds the role as a trustee of the Khazanah Research Institute, Yayasan Khazanah, and UEM Group Berhad. Prior to Khazanah, Mr. Nicholas worked as an economist at Malaysia's Economic Planning Unit, where he was directly involved in several national development initiatives. Furthermore, Mr. Nicholas holds a master's in public administration in international development from Harvard Kennedy School and a degree in economics from Harvard College. Currently, he is pursuing a part-time PhD in political economy at King's College London. Alongside his roles, he writes a monthly column for The Age Malaysia, and you can find all his articles at www.nicholaskaur.com. Moving on to our second speaker today, we have Ms. Crystal Yip with us, who is a Senior Lead Digital and Innovation at the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, also known as UNGC-MYB. Ms. Crystal is a dedicated professional with experience in both the non-profit and private sectors, giving her a strong understanding of business operations, environmental responsibility, and social impact. Ms. Crystal also holds a master's degree in science and has published research in the field. At the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, Ms. Crystal has led initiatives on climate action, water resilience, and supply chain programs. Ms. Crystal also played key roles in developing the ESG Start Maturity Assessment tool, which is now used by companies such as Petronas, Prasarana, Sarawak Energy, RHB, and Heineken. Additionally, Ms. Crystal contributed to the Progress Climate Maturity Assessment with Alliance Bank and led the development of the Corporate Sustainability Practitioner Competency Framework 2.0 with Bursa Malaysia. Through her work, Ms. Crystal continues to drive sustainable development across Malaysia and Brunei. Moving on is the third speaker of today, which is Ms. Siti Nurbaiti, who is the Head of Sustainability Management, Bursa Malaysia Berhad. Ms. Siti started her career in a range of roles including administration, procurement, and logistics, which gave her a solid foundation in operations and business processes. Over time, Ms. Siti shifted to health, safety, and environment, where she first encountered the idea of responsible businesses, balancing profit, people, and the planet. Miss Siti's growing interest in sustainability led her to an ESG-focused role at MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad, a subsidiary of FGV Holdings Berhad. There, she helped integrate ESG principles into her core business functions, expanding her knowledge of sustainability strategy and stakeholder management. Now, she works at the Group Sustainability Division at Bursa Malaysia, where she plays a key role in advancing corporate sustainability practices at both the national and industry levels. Without further ado, let's dive into our conversation. Let me begin the panel session by asking a few starter questions to give a taster of today's session. So, a question posed to all the panelists today. To start off, can each of you briefly explain your role and how it relates to the value chain development and innovation? Maybe we can start off with Mr. Nicholas first, since we were the first to introduce you.
Yep, thank you. And thank you as well for inviting me to be here today with all of you. I'm at Khazanah, which is a Malaysian sovereign fund, where we have a mandate in part to do strategic investing for the country. So when we think of investing strategically for the country, we are trying to drive economic development. So this is really investing for Malaysia's economic growth. And so one of the things that we do is something called Dana Impact, or the Impact Fund, where we invest via what we call high impact programs. One of those high impact programs is actually on semiconductors, because as many of you may be familiar, semiconductors are both a historical strength for Malaysia since the 1970s, but also something which is geopolitically very significant at the moment. So when we invest in semiconductors, what we're trying to do is to move Malaysia, up the value chain, where if just a very brief introduction of the semiconductor value chain, the most upstream, so value chains, normally we describe them from upstream to downstream. The most upstream is design or design tools or that kind of stuff. In the manufacturing process, in the middle, usually they're called fabs or fabrication. And then after that, there's testing and assembly. So Malaysia right now is a significant player in the testing and assembly side. But if you look commercially, that is actually the lowest value added and the lowest profit pool. So while Malaysia does have a very big footprint in that space, it's not actually the most profitable. Where you would like to be is in the design space. So as we think about moving Malaysia up the value chain, we're investing and working with partners to see how we can invest in more Malaysian companies, and get them to participate more in the semiconductor design space. So I'll just start there just to show directly how we're involved in some of these things. Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. And I agree that semiconductor industry.
Just call me Nick.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nick. So Mr. Nick has
no
brought up
need Mr.
a very
No need
important-
Mr. Just Nick.
Oh, all right. So Nick has brought up a very significant point, which is that Malaysia is one of the leading industries in semiconductor. However, due to the value chain being very low right now, it sort of plays along with the economy, and therefore, in order to extend the value chain, we must find different sponsors and also different collaborations with others. So that's what Mr. Nick has been talking about. So thank you so much, Nick, for the insights. Moving on, maybe we can have Miss Crystal to enlighten us on this.
Hi, Tasha. Thanks for the introduction earlier. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. So basically, I'm with UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei. I know it's a mouthful, but in short, it's UNGCMYP. So I lead the digital and innovation initiatives in helping businesses actually navigate their ESG transformation. And a big part of my work is on conceptualizing the strategic solutions and working with our tech partners to turn those ideas into practical tools that actually support companies as well. So not just internally, but across their wider value chains. So in many ways, value chain development and innovation, they aren't side tasks. They're actually central to everything that we do. And for instance, we've actually supported organizations like Sarawak Energy, Alliance Bank, Petronas Prasonar, and many others on their supply chain journey as well. So that's what we do in essence as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal, for the insights. Maybe we can move on to Ms. Siti for your sharing.
So, hi everyone. Thank you for having me here. As a part of Bursa Malaysia Group Sustainability Division, my role is quite unique. Maybe some of you may know that Bursa is wearing two hats. One as the market regulator, and the other one as a PLC itself. So we are at the heart of the Malaysian capital market, and my division is instrumental in advancing corporate sustainability practices. It's not about green initiatives. It is about embedding the ESG pillars into the very fabric of how companies operate and are valued. Think of us as the architects of a sustainable future of our listed companies. Then we encourage companies to report on their ESG performance as a market regulator, which pushes them to understand and improve their entire value chain actually, from sourcing raw materials to product delivery and even end of life management, or some in a manufacturing, they are likely to call this as life cycle assessment. And this focus drives innovation in processes, products, and even business models as companies seek more sustainable ways to create value. And the other hand is making sure Bursa itself as a listed company walks the talk. We scrutinize our own value chain, where we source, how we use energy, how we engage with our stakeholders, and look for innovative ways to reduce our footprint and enhance positive impact.
Thank
That's
you,
all
Ms.
from me,
Siti.
Tasha.
Thank you, Ms. Siti, for the insights. Since we're at the topic of value chain right now, just now we have been briefly enlightened by each and every one of the panelists' role on the value chain. So just wanted to ask a question, which is, for the concept of ascending the value chain, what does it mean to you personally in the context of today's fast evolving global economy?
Okay, I can go first again. So I think the reality is that over the past 70 years or so since World War II, the global economy has evolved in a way such that it's very rare for any single country to own an entire value chain within its own borders. So one thing you'll hear is that value chains are increasingly integrated, and something that is produced in country A required steps of the production in countries B, C, D, E, maybe back again in A and back out to F and whatever it is. So it's really difficult to imagine a world now or where something as complex as semiconductors, again coming back to the example since I started with that, is only produced in one country. And the reason is because if you think of the most cutting edge semiconductor chips, the company that produces or manufactures those chips is really in one location, which is Taiwan, is in TSMC, right? But to produce those chips, they need something called an EUV machine or lithographic machine from the Netherlands. So which is by a company called ASML. So if you think about it, then where you are in the value chain kind of determines how much of the profit pool you catch. So if you're going to be stuck in the lower end of the value chain, then does that mean that your economic growth opportunities are going to be less than what they are? Maybe, if that is actually the where you are right now. If you're obviously if you're not an industrial country yet, where you haven't started the process, is still in agriculture, it's not so bad to maybe take up some parts of those value chains so that you can develop some industrial capabilities. But if you haven't, then what you want to do is to, so to speak, ascend the value chain. And we have to be careful when we say ascend. What we're really looking for is to be part of the value chain where the most capabilities are required. So therefore you develop internal tested know-how in your country. And also, for the companies in which your country, the companies in which in particular owned by nationals of your country, you would really want them to be exporting those kinds of in those kinds of play in those kinds of parts of the value chain. So just because something is more upstream or more downstream doesn't automatically make it ascendant. It really is which part actually is the most valuable, and that's the part that we have to look for.
Thank you, Nick, for explaining the concept of the value chain very briefly and also very comprehensively. Moving on, maybe Miss Siti could answer to this question.
Well, to me, from my POV, the ascending the value chain is moving away from simply being a low-cost producer or a provider of basic goods. I think it's about shifting towards a higher value-added activities, innovation, and specialization. It means creating products and services that command higher prices because they are more sophisticated, more sustainable, or simply better in some significant way. Think of it as upgrading from making basic components to designing the entire cutting edge gadget, as mentioned by Nick. I think in today's fast evolving global economy, this means a few things in terms of digital transformation. You know, the IoT, AI, big data, sustainable practices, how companies embed sustainability strategy into their own business plans and strategy, and knowledge intensive industries, meaning that moving from labor intensive to knowledge intensive activities. This will require a highly skilled workforce, heavily continuous R&D, research and development, and a culture of lifelong learning. That is my opinion.
Thank you, Miss Siti, for the sharing. Moving on, maybe you can have Miss Crystal.
Hi, thanks, Tasha. So I actually agree with Nick and also Siti. When it comes to ascending the value chain, it's not really about producing the cheapest product, value driven and basically future ready, fit for the future, right? It's all about being from being reactive to becoming a strategic way of evolving. Not just changing the value chain itself, but shaping the whole ecosystem as well. So, that also means, embedding innovation, resilience into your core business. It's about really shaping the whole ecosystem by putting in place like better processes, building, responsible partnerships, and really unlocking the long-term competitive advantage. So that's how I feel. Yeah.
Thank you to all panelists for your answers. I do agree with everyone's statement, and since especially Nick has mentioned about the being a part of the value chain doesn't mean that you have to be solely in the value chain. Like you have to determine where your location is and where your position is. So moving on to my next question, which is related to this statement. We are all aware that businesses today are under constant pressure to innovate and also to stay competitive. So how would you define a company that has successfully moved up the value chain, and what are the defining characteristics?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all definition for this, Tasha. And certainly also maybe something, because this is a public policy competition, right? So maybe for something for you all to think about also is what is the difference between an incentive for, let's say, a country, what it wants to do versus what a company wants to do. And so let me explain a little bit more. So if you're a country, obviously you want your companies to be more dynamic, to move up the value chain, to do all this kind of innovative stuff, right? But if you're a company, and especially one where, historically, let's say you've derived a lot of value by providing really solid services. So let's say you are Tenaga Nasional or something else, right? Then the question is, what innovation makes sense for you? And if you innovate too much, maybe your shareholders won't like it. And maybe, every time companies take more risk, it's potentially the case that they might destroy value because you try something new. Anytime you move to a new geography, anytime you move to a new sector that you've never done before, and so on, you really run the risk of destroying value. And we've definitely seen that a lot of times in corporate Malaysia. But by the way, the same is also true of really what you would think of internationally innovative firms. So let's take some very concrete examples of some of the biggest firms that do technology, right? So Meta, which owns Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and so on. for the longest time has poured billions of dollars into the metaverse. It's not really worked out. Amazon poured billions into Alexa, hasn't really worked out. Google did Google Glass. Apple only recently stopped this idea of a self-driving car. So even the biggest firms, when they innovate, they can make, they don't always necessarily succeed. So therefore, when we think of the most innovative firms, actually we should be asking, what kind of firms do a lot of R&D, and what is their failure rate? So one thing to think about is for the public policy competition folks, right, is if you think of banks, let's say let's take, I mentioned CIMB, right? So take CIMB or Maybank or whatever. So if you ask them what would be their preferred non-performing loan ratio as a total of all loans, a non-performing loan means a loan where you lend money to someone and they actually haven't paid you back because they can't or whatever. The banks would actually tell you, obviously, each bank, they want it to be zero because they want all their loans to be profitable, and therefore they want all the people they lend money to pay them back, right? But actually, from an economy point of view, we don't really want the non-performing loan ratio for all banks to be zero. Why? Because it means you're not taking enough risk. If there were no failures, then actually you're not taking enough risk. And so we have to think systematically, as you think of being in the value chain, for our companies to innovate, to try to move up the value chain. What is a failure rate that economically you're willing to tolerate? And therefore, what kind of funding would be appropriate given the risk that you want them to take?
Thank you, Nick, for the insights. I do agree that in a business-wise, risk management is definitely something to consider, and there's give and take in every situation. Moving on, maybe we have Miss Crystal.
For me, I would say that it's businesses that actually measure success beyond profits, right? They actually integrate perhaps ESG performance into their definition of a long-term value, and they actually have companies that actually understand how they can actually connect the dots across their operations, their suppliers, as well as their markets. As Nick mentioned, also, the way how they actually manage risk and then identify the opportunities across the entire value chain. And in the sense of the consistency and the innovation as well, because innovation is not just a one-off product launch, right? It's about rethinking the processes, the talent, the culture, and the companies. Basically, they actually embed it into their DNA. Investing in capacity building, not just in technology, but also the people and partnerships as well. So, for example, companies like I'm talking about just in Malaysia per se, like Sarawak Energy or Petronas or maybe Prasarana as well, they have actually been really actively supporting their suppliers' ESG journey through their supply chain programs. So they're not just ticking boxes off, they're actually creating that shared value that enhances the resilience and the trust across their supply chain. So taking, for example, maybe Petronas's supplier support program as an example, it's a really well-designed initiative that actually begins with a digital ESG maturity assessment tool for their suppliers, and then based on that results, the suppliers actually are segmented into whether it's a basic, intermediate, or advanced levels, and from there they actually receive targeted support accordingly. And this is where the support doesn't just stop at that assessment. That's where the consistency and the support comes in, where Petronas actually provides the access through our training programs, followed by reporting through Bursa CSI platform as well, which I'm sure CP would know best. And of course, lastly, they actually connect suppliers to a funding ecosystem. So that's the reason why I mentioned earlier that the ecosystem as a whole is really important, in supporting the whole value chain as it is. So to me, that's what how the innovation value chain actually looks like, where it's practical, real-time solutions, and how it actually strengthens the whole ecosystem.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal, for explaining to us how the ecosystem and especially extensive cross-collaboration support is important, especially it could be one of the defining characteristics of a business that could ascend the value chain. Moving on is Miss Siti.
To me, a company that successfully, I think, not successfully moved up to the value chain is actually a journey. You can it does value chain doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't have an end goal. It's a journey. It's always evolving, you know. So I think company that has successfully, quite successful, maybe ahead in the value chain, is not just profitable, they are also resilient and future proof. I think I'm talking from the sustainability practitioner seat right now. I'm talking about companies that are sustainable and practice ethical business. For example, companies like Hatalega Holdings. They are not only innovated the glove manufacturing. They use cutting edge technologies actually from German. They are very ahead in terms of producing, in terms of the technology that they use to produce the products. They also integrated sustainability, becoming the first glove manufacturer to disclose critically reviewed carbon footprint data. This shows that they are thinking about the long-term impact on people and planet, not just profit. And another one is companies that are agile and adaptable. They can quickly pivot and adapt to new technologies, changing consumer preference and geopolitical shifts. My early career in logistics and procurement taught me that even the most well-oiled machines needs to be adaptable. Um, but in order for you to do that, actually, you must start with. This is just my opinion. You must start with the fundamental, which is to find what is the material, topic for your business. You must start with that first. When you identify, yeah, you already identified what are the material topics for your business that are related to your business. It will be easier for you to focus on which area for you to focus on. That is material not only to you but also to your external stakeholders. Thank you, Tasha.
Thank you, Ms. Siti, for your answer. And I also concur that the value chain is always evolving, and so is the global economy now. It keeps on evolving. So this leads me to my next question, which is, since in this evolving world right now, innovation is the key in today's business landscape. So how do you see sustainable innovation shaping value chains? And what is the relationship between sustainability and innovation in this context? This is open to all the panelists. If anyone would like to have it a go.
Perhaps I can go on this one, Tasha. So for
Right.
me, I think that it's fundamentally shifting how companies operate, right? So sustainability used to be compliance driven, but right now it's more of a strategy driven. And other putting aside all the digital tools that I mentioned earlier, um, they actually help set the companies their ESG risk and their readiness across the value chains, right? And enabling the targeted action in that sense. So this not only improves their performance and reducing the risk exposure, but also builds that long-term business resilience. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times sustainability is no longer a checkbox exercise. It's actually a growth strategy if you think about it. And in that sense, sustainability becomes the lens through which innovation is focused and directed. So it's more about shaping it to be smarter and a more resilient value chain.
Ms. Siti?
I think the relationship between sustainability and innovation is symbiotic. Sustainability as an innovation driver. Sustainability challenges like climate change or resource scarcity are powerful motivators for innovation. They force companies to think creatively about new solutions, technologies, and efficiencies. For example, a company aiming for net zero or decarbonization will innovate into renewable energy, carbon capture, or process optimization in terms of digitalization and all that. And innovation as an enabler of sustainability. Conversely, innovation provides the tools and technologies to achieve sustainability goals. Without advancements in renewable energy, green materials, and efficient logistics, many sustainability targets will be impossible to meet. For me, my opinion is sustainability without innovation is just good intention. Innovation without sustainability It's just, well, more stuff for landfills. Together, they are ultimate power couple for companies.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Thank you, Ms. Siti, for giving the insights on how sustainability and innovation can be integrated, and there is actually a synergy, and it actually propels the business to grow in the value chain. So, I'd like to ask for this is a question posed to all the panelists here. From your experience in each of your fields, how important it is for a country like Malaysia to focus on ascending the value chain, and what does national policy play in this process?
Okay. So let me tell a story of two different types of balls. So a baseball. I know Malaysia, baseball is not a very popular sport, but a baseball, the way you make a baseball is handmade, right? It requires actually stitching together the material, the leather, and so on. So it's very handmade. A golf ball, on the other hand, the golf ball, it has a lot of little indents in it and so on. A golf ball is actually made by machines for the most part, because the material is also what it is, and a lot of it is actually done by factories, very high value added, high technology kind of factories. In a very related story, the major maker of baseballs globally is the country called Haiti, which is very poor. And the major manufacturer of golf balls globally is the United States, which is obviously not very poor. So ultimately, I think over the long run, the productivity and the ultimate trajectory of a country's economic development will, in large part, be down to what you can produce. And if you keep producing low-end stuff, and if your companies keep competing on being the lowest cost, then you're going to, then there's a ceiling to what you can achieve. And therefore, this gives a real incentive for countries to really focus on how they can move up the value chain and to try to produce more innovative stuff, more complex stuff, more sophisticated stuff, especially if you can export. In the past, since World War II, out of maybe 100 and whatever countries, only 16 countries actually managed to transition towards becoming high-income countries. And there are three categories of these countries. The first is they discovered massive amounts of oil. The second is that they joined the European Union. And the third is that they were the Asian tigers. So this is primarily Taiwan, South Korea, Japan to an extent, although Japan's a little earlier. And so these three. And and really for Malaysia and many developing countries, the only one you can really kind of try to replicate, because it's you can't hope to find oil, massive amounts of oil just like that. And if you're not in Europe, you can't really join the European Union. So the one that you can hope to replicate is these East Asian tigers, where they systematically try to move up the value chain in really a lot of different kinds of ways. And I think the key for policy is to think about what can you do to try to unlock and try to understand these case studies, and how much of these were collaborations between the public sector and the private sector. Anybody who tells you that the government and the public sector had zero role to play and only the private sector did it, they don't understand their history. It's always been some combination of markets plus state, and then certainly different ratios at certain points in time. So as you go on your public policy journey, try not to be too ideological. Try to keep an open mind that actually a lot of what you do in public policy is you need to have a toolbox where you have like a hammer, a screwdriver, a drill, a spanner, a wrench, whatever, and try to choose the right tool for the right situation, right? And so when you think of national policy, then try to think about how you can use all the tools in your toolbox, whether it's, let's say, your development finance institutions, whether it's your own fiscal budget, whether it's your banking system, or whatever else it might be, to try and develop the policies you need. And don't be too, there are many ways, okay, when it comes to financing development, beyond just the government pays for something, right? Government can pay for stuff, but how do you unlock it with other things? So I encourage all of you, because next week is your in-person, whatever, actual competition, right? Try to spend a bit of time thinking about policies and how to finance them. And maybe my advice is that a good policy has to hit four things. And if any of the four are not there, it's a completely meaningless policy. The first is that hopefully it's technically sound, meaning that it's a policy that makes sense from like a theoretical point of view. Number two, can it actually get political support? There's no point, again, policy sounds closer to politics than it does to economics. And if you cannot get political support for your policy, it won't get passed and you'll never see the light of day. So the most perfect thing can't work. The third thing, and people often forget this one, it needs to be implementable. So if let's say you have a policy that's so perfect, but you can't implement it because either the bureaucracy is not good enough or it's just too unwieldy. For example, if you think about how you want to give out cash handouts, do you want to target every single person perfectly? Or do you just want to give a blanket? Just think of issues like that. And the fourth, can it be financed? So as you prepare for your policy competition next week, try to think along those four things, because if any of those four are missing, actually in the real world, policy can't move forward.
Thank you, Nick, for actually describing very well on how the importance of the value chain is and how it impacts every country. And thank you also for the pointers on how to craft a good policy. We'll definitely keep it in mind and definitely let the participants know that this is important for you to craft your policy. Moving on, we could have Miss Siti to take the floor.
Not really policy person, but I think from a citizen and as the Malaysian citizen and also the citizen of corporate, I think national policy plays an indispensable role. It sets the direction, provides the scaffolding, and even offers the incentive in terms of providing strategic roadmaps like the industrial master plan, like the digital economy blueprint, and then investment in R&D and education such as the STEM, TVET, to cultivate the necessary skills and innovation ecosystem. And then the regulatory environment, a policy that is clear, stable, and supportive encourage businesses to invest in innovation and sustainability rather than being bogged down by unnecessary hurdles. Bursa Malaysia, as a frontline regulator, we understand this balance very well. And another one is fiscal incentive, the tax breaks, grants, and financing programs for companies investing in automation, digitalization, and green technologies. Maybe you have heard about the GC3, the program that is co-chaired by Negara and also the Securities Commission. It's a fantastic example of policy driving climate finance and innovation, aiming to bridge the gap between a broad strategic vision and a practical implementation.
Thank you, Ms. Siti, for listing down the policies and also real-life examples that are highly relevant to the value chain. Moving on is Ms. Crystal.
Not so much of a policy person as well, like Siti, but then of course, in my opinion, of course, the National Sustainability Reporting Framework, NSRF, and also the 12 Major Plan, they are actually pushing us in the right direction, right? But of course, for the real acceleration to happen when these policies are in place, is there something that is, that can be actually translated into something accessible and practical tools, right? For the businesses to actually implement within the organizations, and especially from things that I've observed, especially for the small and medium enterprises, the SMEs, they're always very skeptical in terms of, whenever these kind of policies are in place, they always have this main challenge of there's not enough resources for it. So perhaps there could be some way that is simpler for them to actually implement. That should be taken into consideration in the policies as well. What kind of tools, like Nick mentioned, to actually really guide them step by step. Because SMEs, they really need this kind of hand-to-hand hand-holding in their sustainability journey. Especially also with Bursa's mandate for listed companies to start reporting against the IFRS. This is also something that most of the SMEs are really struggling with as well. Although it doesn't apply to them directly at the moment, but for the larger corporations, it is something for them that they really need to catch up on.
Tasha, if
Thank
I
you.
may add a little bit from my experience, as a safety, health, and environment practitioner a while ago, actually, if you rely on companies to do good, right, before without any policy from the government, like enforcement from the DOSH and DOE, companies will not do good, voluntarily. So they only care about profit. That's the current state of Malaysia right now. So they only care about profit without national policy, without any enforcement for the government, any regulation from the government. They will not automatically, do good either for the planet, or for the people. So this is very crucial to ensure that everyone is on the same on the same lane, I would say, on the same value, I would say, so that we are more guided, and there are law and regulation that control, quote unquote, control us as the business operators. Without national policy plays a very crucial role in ensuring that businesses in Malaysia, whether it's SME or PLC, they follow some sort of guideline to ensure that we meet the targets. That's all.
Thank you to all panelists for sharing your insights and your experience, and also from your perspective. It definitely enlightened everyone, especially our audience, in today's session. So speaking about our audience, I believe most of our participants are youths, and in the line of youth and sustainability, Ms. Krista, I believe that the participants are keen to know more about your line of work. Could you care to share more about the Youth Executive Sustainability Pulse Survey?
Okay, all right. So yes, I'm really excited to share that. Basically, it's an annual initiative by the UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei, to actually better understand, right, how young professionals in Malaysia, aged 20 to 35, actually perceive sustainability, particularly in the context of their values, their career choices, and the workplace expectations, and why this actually matters for youth, right? Because your voices actually shape the future of business. And companies are actually starting to realize that sustainability isn't just about market expectation, it's a talent expectation. So the insights from YES actually helps organizations to realign their practices and culture to attract and retain the next generation of change makers. So if you're a young professional, or you know any one of you who are, of course, love that you actually take our survey. And after all, your voice is really what matters to us, and this is one way of making you heard. Thank you. So do take the survey by scanning the QR code as well.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal, for the sharing session. Yes, to all the participants out there, if you're keen on, if you are young, driven youths who are keen in sustainability, do take the survey. And yeah, we will leave this on for a few seconds. Then we'll move on to our next segment, which is the Q&A session. All right, I hope everyone has taken the survey already and scanned the code, because now we'll move on to the Q&A session, where I believe everyone here is dying for the panelists to answer your burning questions. So let's start up with the first question. The first question is by a participant called Muhammad Arif. Given Petronas' historically centralized role in Malaysia's oil and gas value chain, how feasible is it to maintain a unified national value chain amid increasing regional autonomy demands from Sabah and Sarawak?
I'm not qualified to answer this question. So all I'll say is that I think Muhammad Alif, you asked I think the question really well. I don't have an answer for you because it's not my area, but I think it just goes to show that when you think of public policy, the politics really, really matters. And so if you want to have a unified value chain as your policy, let's say, how does that work with more political autonomy from the different states? So I think it's a great way to frame the question, but I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately.
No worries. Thank you, Nick, for the attempt to answer. We really appreciate it. May I know if Ms. Siti or Ms. Crystal would like to address this question?
Not my area as well.
Unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of Petronas as well, and this is also out of my expertise. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much for attempting the question. We'll move on to another question by a participant. What emerging trends do you see in integrating planetary health, sustainability, and innovation in the value chain?
Maybe I can chip in. The emerging trends will be digitalization, data, climate change. Will also involve in policy changes, change management. That's the chain reaction, and I think with the IoT as well. That is my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Siti. Let's move on to the next question because I believe there are many questions left to address. Next up is, with Malaysia's business landscape compromising 97% of SMEs, is bringing SMEs to mid-market level more relevant than bringing mid-market levels to corporate level in our value chain?
Okay, I have opinions about this one, so maybe I'll start first. I think when you look at that 97% of Malaysian companies being SMEs, right? I think the other part that's really important to also ask, how many of these are micro enterprises, which are actually, many of them are like, they're included as micro enterprises are things like people who sell food by the side of the road, like all the stalls, the warung, the garais, all that kind of stuff, and the small kedai runcit. And when people start a micro SME, especially a micro enterprise, I think you have to ask the question. Again, this is the policy question to ask, right? How many of these people who are a micro entrepreneur would actually rather be doing paid employment? Meaning that they started their micro enterprise because they had no other option. They couldn't find a job, so to survive, they had to, let's say, sell nasi lemak by the roadside or something like that. So when you think of this, right? I think it's worth trying to ask the question, particular SMEs, how many of these SMEs that include micro enterprises really actually are people who want to be entrepreneurs? Okay, so question one. Therefore, to your next question then, is bringing SMEs to mid-market level more relevant than bringing mid-markets to corporate level? So if the answer to the question of how many micro entrepreneurs actually really want to be paid, to get regular paid employment, if the answer is quite a lot, then actually, how should you really be focused from a policy point of view on trying to bring these folks to mid-market level, as opposed to policies that help them find better paid employment by creating more jobs elsewhere? So I think it's a way for you to think about the question. So I have an answer, but I think it's better for me to help you reframe this and come up with your own answer. And so when you think of mid-markets to corporate level, so then if your policy resources are limited, let's say there's only so much financial support you can give, is it worth helping those who are already like with some track record of exporting and whatever, or track record of 100 million ringgit revenue or whatever it is, trying to grow them to be big corporate players and actually export globally? Or would you actually focus on these other the rest of the economy? Many of them may not even want to be micro enterprises, or may not even want to be entrepreneurial, but are just forced to. So just something for you to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Nick, for the questions posed to the audience, also for us to think more and also develop our thoughts more on how do we craft our policy based on these questions. Ms. Crystal, Ms. Siti, would you like to address this question? If not, we can move on to other questions as well.
I think we can move on to another question.
All right. The last question, because I believe time is almost ending soon. So to wrap up this entire panel session, this is a question posed to all the panelists here. Where do you see Malaysia's position in the global chain in the next 5 to 10 years, taking planetary health into consideration? And what are the steps businesses should be taking today to achieve this?
So it depends on the policies that you guys can come up with. So the next 5 to 10 years, let's see what you can come up with, because obviously, planetary health is a very key center at Sunway. But I do think just one thing for me as you go on this public policy journey, as you incorporate planetary health considerations into your policies, think also about what economic development sectors or different parts of the value chain, or even different industries all together, that you can think about when you include planetary health and how you work with nature. So consider things like biomimicry. If Malaysia were to play a part in that in 5 to 10 years, actually, what policies will you design? So I don't think it's entirely deterministic where Malaysia will be in 5 to 10 years. I think it's the choices we make, and let's see if maybe some of you have good policies, and in 5 to 10 years time, many of you will graduate and be playing important roles, and then maybe we can have a much better future in 10 years.
Thank you, Nick, for your answer. Miss Crystal, do you have an answer in mind?
I would say fundamentally, yes, that it's ultimately up to our decision. What choice that we make determines what is the outcome, right? So essentially, fundamentally, of course, invest in your own skills first, be future fit first, and basically build your own capabilities in order to make the right decisions or the right steps that you want to take as well. And leverage as much of digital tools as you can to achieve those goals as well. Yeah, that's from me.
Thank you, Miss Crystal, for your insights. Miss Siti, the floor is yours.
As for me, I'm cautiously optimistic. I see Malaysia solidifying its position as a regional hub for high-value manufacturing, digital services, and sustainable innovation, particularly within ASEAN. We will be known not just for what we produce, but how we produce it sustainably, efficiently, and intelligently. I think we will have moved significantly beyond just being a component assembler to a design, innovation, and R&D powerhouse in specific niche.
Thank you to all panelists for your sharings. And I do concur with every one of you that with now policies evolve, with now the Malaysia economic landscape evolving, the right policies are to ensure the right to ensure that Malaysia is set in the right setting. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you so much to all the panelists for taking the time off on your Saturday to join us. So with that, we conclude today's panel session, and I'll pass the floor to Hannes.
Thank you, Tasha. A big thank you to our panelists for such an insightful and enriching discussion, and to our moderator for skillfully guiding the conversation. I'm confident that our attendees are leaving today's session with valuable knowledge and practical takeaways as part of their competition to support their policy development journey leading up to the semifinals and finals. Before we proceed, we would like to have a short photo-taking session with our panelists. To our panelists and moderator, please turn your cameras on and smile for us. I think our team is ready to take a screenshot. All right, ready? 1, 2, and 3. All right, great. Thank you so much. So without further ado, we also don't want to take everyone's time. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to fill out our feedback form. Your insights will help us understand your experience and continue to improve our future MPPC programs. Our feedback form will be shared on the screen in just a few moments. I believe you'll be able to see it now. So please scan the QR code below to fill in the form. I'd also like to remind the MPPC participants that submitting this feedback form is compulsory and will also count as your attendance as part of the bootcamp. So please scan the QR code. We'll show this on the screen for a few more moments. All right. Just to close today's session, I have a few more youth opportunities to share with you from the Sunway Center for Planetary Health. So on this slide, you can see that we have currently 2 new youth initiatives at the center. The first one is the Planetary Health Youth Ambassadors Council, PHYAC. So PHYAC is a year-long leadership and capacity building program for youth aged 30 and below. And you can be the bridge between the youth network, which I will speak about in just a second, and the center. So it connects you with experienced mentors and leaders in the planetary health space, and it's also an opportunity for you to represent youth voices at local and global platforms and conferences such as FAM, regional hubs, and more. So if this sounds like something that you would like to commit to, please scan the QR code on the right on the top, PHYAC. And then now I'd like to also share about the Planetary Health Youth Action Network, PHYAN. So the network is a flexible, inclusive space open to all youth interested in planetary health, regardless of your background or experience. So this is a space for you to share your own initiatives and ideas and also connect with other climate conscious peers as well. So unlike the council, which is a year-long commitment, this one has no fixed terms and is also flexible and inclusive. It's a space designed to stay inspired, informed, and involved whenever you're ready. So if this sounds more like something you would want to commit to, you can also scan the QR code. But you can also find more information on our initiatives at Sunway CPH. We're on social media platforms, as you can see at the bottom. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, and also YouTube. All right, so I think just to close today's session, I'd like to thank you again for tuning in to today's virtual panel session. Have a good weekend. Thank you for spending an hour of your Saturday with us, and we hope to see your energetic selves in person next week on the 28th of June for our Physical Policy Bootcamp at Sunway International School. So stay tuned for the upcoming sessions. Do make full use of the Policy Bootcamp materials when you are crafting your policies. This is out for the MPPC participants. I will now bring this virtual panel session to a close. Thank you very much again. Good luck and all the best to our MPPC participants, and have a great weekend to all. Thank you very much.